So, Dr. Rod, let's move to our second last topic, talking about leaders and money. I thought this was actually a really good story to kind of wrap up. We've been talking a lot about money today, but I heard this story this morning actually, and yesterday, sorry, and as I was preparing for this, and thought this would be a really nice message to join, because we're talking about leaders and leadership and money, and the challenges we have to face with all the money that's happening, with all the money situations that are happening in the world. But there's a leader, an industry leader, that is now a ministry leader that has actually made decision external to money, or actually at the cost of some money. And let me talk about Granger Smith. Granger Smith, he is a country music, let's call him star, that he's just recently come out saying that he's quitting the country music industry and going and serving in his local church full time. He's doing a master's degree in theology as well, to get to know God some more. But he's had this incredible journey with God and his relationship with God over the last few years. He has 4 children. Unfortunately, one of them in 2019 at 3 years old died, drowned in their local water hole in their home. And he's been on this journey building, trying to find what God is in this whole situation. And he's actually written a book. His son's name was River, and he's written a book called Like a River, which talks about his journey with Christ and like post losing his 3-year-old son. But it's really interesting that he's left all of this behind and chosen to dedicate his life to Christ. Now, this is just the next season. Who knows what God has for him next. But he was asked about why didn't he stay in the industry where he's got lots of influence and obviously still make money and have the influence there for Christ. And it was really interesting. His response was, it's there. He would find it. I really appreciated his honesty and his vulnerability, saying, I struggle with ego. I struggle with the attention, with wanting attention and needing attention and praise from people. And he says, there's no way that I could be a star, a country music, star. I couldn't be that and not be there for, even if I was there for the glory of God, not be there receiving the accolades and glory myself. And I thought that was a really good take, is he really did give up money. I've tried to do lots of research, and there's not much information online. His income ranged from $100,000 a year to $1 million a year. I would assume that as a country music star, there's pretty good money in country music. He wasn't earning $100,000 a year. Let's just assume that. But I think the best estimates that I could gather is he was making about $1 million a year, and he's chosen to give that up to pursue Christ. Dr. Rod, as you know, I went through a situation like that. I wasn't a country music star or anything like that, but I gave up my business, and I gave up my whole life situation to really dedicate my time to Christ. It was the best time of my life, the best thing I could ever do. And you were a crucial part of that, because you actually allowed me couch surf, so to speak. But didn't give me a couch. You gave me a room and a place to stay, and food in my belly and everything like that, which I'm forever grateful for. But what's your take on someone like this? Obviously, you got a little bit of love for country music. How do you feel about this situation?
I have mixed feelings, actually, because you're right. I like country music. I actually did a Christian country music radio program for 11 years.
Yes.
And loved it, absolutely loved it. I met some of the most amazing people, interviewed lots of country music artists and not just singers, but songwriters as well, a couple of producers too. I loved it, loved every minute of it. But like you, I made a decision a few years ago to give up full-time paid employment as CEO of a higher education institution here in Australia, because I wanted to do my pastoring job better, and I wanted to spend more time on two fabulous global ministries, Business as Mission and what is now known as Kingdom Initiatives. And it was really impossible for me to work full-time as a CEO and pastor to the extent that I wanted to, and also to be more heavily involved in those two fabulous global ministries or global movements. So I can understand to some extent what he's been through. And look, the only question I would ever ask of anybody in a position like this is, are you following the Lord? So has the Lord called you to go into a full-time ministry position of one kind or another? And if the Lord has done that, then there's no argument, is there? I would just talk, if he'd come to me for advice before he made this decision, no special reason why he would, but if he'd come to me, I would have talked with him about the whole notion of calling and of assignment. So my advice would have been, sit down and figure out whether your calling is actually in the area of country music or whether it's in the area of ministry. Now, I happen to believe that our calling doesn't really change radically or much over time, but our assignment could change significantly.
Yeah, that's good.
And, I would just watch, I guess, interested from afar to see exactly how his talent marries up with whatever ministry he ends up in a little down the track. He hasn't defined exactly what kind of ministry he's going to pursue. He said, I'm not going to go and start a church or anything. Who knows? But that will become apparent down the track. And look, even if he made a mistake, it's not irreversible. So I really honour him for what he's doing, because an artist such as him, it's not just giving up a stream of income, as you say, giving up a lot of money, $1 million or more a year. It's giving up the opportunity to interact with other people in the industry. It's maybe letting down your fans. There's a lot of considerations, and I have no doubt
the fame.
He's canvassed them all.
The ego stroke that you get from it, like that would be really difficult to go, okay,
I think so.
Even though I think that even though he acknowledged that that's a weakness and that he enjoys that, that praise. I mean, you're standing on stage and there are thousands of people, literally hands raised, worshiping you. Like it's there has to be. There, I would hope that he's being counseled and being advised, by psychologists or whatever as well, to make sure this transition, the emotions of this transition are being managed, because there's going to be loss. Because I remember did you go through the same thing, Dr. Rod? I know when I gave up that time, there was a big identity loss for me, because I was the business person. I was the, that's who I was. I was the business person. I was the one who funded things. I was the guy that had money. I was always, there was part of that transition was I was losing, as Christ says, we need to die to ourselves. That was a difficult part of the transition, not just the practical changes in my lifestyle and things like that, but that identity change and the emotional change. Did you go through that same thing in that transition for you too?
No.
You were a lot more weathered and seasoned person by that stage, obviously.
I had another major shift a decade or so prior to that when I left a government-funded university to go and work for a Christian higher education provider. That was a massive change for me because I was absolutely certain for many, many years that my assignment, my calling has always been built around communication.
Yes.
So I've been a university lecturer for a long time. I was a radio announcer. I got engaged in public speaking, those kinds of things over a long, long period of time. It goes back more than 50 years, in fact. I can trace it back to there. But I felt my assignment was to be a Christian in a senior management position in a publicly funded, that is a government-funded university. The process by which I came finally to the conclusion that my assignment was changing, it ran over 18 months. And that was quite traumatic to make that shift from being a Christian in a senior management position in a thoroughly sort of secular environment to teaching other Christians how to be Christians in the marketplace was a massive and somewhat traumatic shift for me.
Yes.
So that happened. That was a process over 2007, 2008. I eventually made the shift in 2009. But this second major shift from a full-time CEO of a startup higher education institution into, I guess, if you like, full-time or fuller time ministry, that there was no trauma there. I suppose because I was already working part-time as a pastor. We'd already planted a church, so there was already a church. I had already been involved for the best part of 10 years with both Kingdom Initiatives and a Business's Mission, and my desire was to get more heavily involved in all three of those areas. So that transition wasn't difficult. I suppose there was some fear about, well, how do I pay the bills? But God has proven very, very faithful in that area, and we've managed to pay the bills. We've paid all our bills in full, on time, despite the fact that I'm only paid 1 day a week by the church. I just pick up a little bit of part-time university lecturing here and there. So that first change, that was traumatic. The second change, no, it wasn't.
I think it's beautiful. Okay, so I just love your defining the difference between your assignment and your calling, because we can often get those caught up. When we talk about purpose, obviously our leadership program is based on that theory about we lead from and through our purpose, and our calling as leaders is to lead other people to discover their purposes as well. And so I love it because we do tend to get those confused, because our purpose does take on different, it wears different hats, I suppose we could say, throughout time. I could say, for me, very similar to you, Dr. Roddy, mine's always been around teaching. I've always been a teacher. Even if I think back to as a kid, I was always trying to teach other people other things, so that's what God has always called me to teach. It's where he's called me to execute that, and the actual focus of that has shifted over time. And so a couple of things is don't hold tight to an assignment, confusing it for a calling, I suppose would be one bit of advice. If you're struggling to discover what your purpose is in life or as a leader, once again, free leadership program below the first 10 weeks we actually spend helping you identify what your purpose is. Free leadership program, shameless plug. Chuck it or have it look down below. But make sure you don't get confused with your calling and your assignment. Don't be holding tight to something that God's actually trying to move you on from because you have that identity wrapped up. And I think that's probably, thinking back to it, is that was what I had my identity. I thought that was my calling, but my calling wasn't that. My calling was still around teaching. It had just shifted to teaching in the church for a season. So our prayer is for Granger Smith and his family, like, well done on making that tough decision, both a very financial and probably emotional and ego decisions, to let them all go. And well done. And I just pray that you're getting the right support along the way. I pray that your fans are supportive of you and can understand this, and they can not be selfish in their loss, but be excited for this new chapter for you. And hopefully some of your fans will be inspired by this and hopefully seek out Christ as well. So we're praying for you, Granger. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.